Today's episode is brought to you by 2AT Fitness and the Brew Bar.
Everything sequel contains explicit language. And why the fudge not, you melon farmer?
Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is the Tremors edition, still. My name is Michael Shantz from the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, as always, is your friend and mine, the fabulous Tom Stewart from Lonesome Whistle Productions. Say hello, Tom.
Free Willy and let the big dog eat.
I thought you might say swallow a little bit of cement and let your balls drop or whatever.
This is interesting. While I always appreciate Burt Gummer's comical turn of phrase, in this movie it gets increasingly weird and slapdash.
Right, yeah. There's a lot of things in this movie that don't work quite as well as the other movies. Let's face it.
Yes. Yeah, it's a metaphor for the entire movie. I think at one point, Bert's zingers become so abstract that in Shrieker Island they have to actually correct it. They have a conversation about how, not just anyone can do Burt Gummerisms. And I think that might be secretly a poke at their own out of control screenwriting.
Well, all right. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are talking about Tremors, A Cold Day in Hell, a 2018 movie directed by Don Michael Paul.
The Hitchcock.
Did he direct any of the
sequels.
other movies, Tom?
He sure did.
Huh?
He surely did.
Did he direct it? But I mean, did he direct any of the other Tremors movies? Is this his first Tremors?
No, he's done a few Tremors. He's the guy that we've been talking about, right? The Hitchcock of video sequels.
He's the professional. Okay.
Yeah, he's Shrieker Island.
I'm wondering why I didn't have it in my notes.
Because we've been doing this for conservatively 5 years.
Oh yeah, where's my Bloodlines notes? Okay.
He's in charge since Bloodlines. Basically, he is the
very good then.
So he's the video auteur that we've been talking about for the past movie or so.
All right, good. Apologies. Usually I'm more prepared. So he's the
just an insight into how long we've been recording these podcasts. That the ink on Michael's notes has now faded.
Oh, I know why. I tore that page out because I had so many notes on that I had it on the back and I wanted it for easy reference. That's what it is.
We've used up a year's worth of a law firm's legal pads.
Oh, man.
Just doing notes for this movie.
It's funny you mentioned that because I keep all my notes on the legal pads. And, I mean, I've had legal pads for years.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where you just don't use them that often. Now that we're doing this show...
Is this an 80 stand-up routine you're beginning
my
here?
God. I'm just saying...
What's the deal with legal pads?
I go through so many legal pads now where if I start, I'm like, thank God, a brand new pad. This should last a while. And then, cut to 14 days later, I'm like, fuck, I need a new legal pad. I'm out of pad.
Well, yes, and also we are increasingly doing podcasts for franchises that are 7 and 8 films long.
I'll say.
So I think you're probably actually being pretty economical.
Okay, good. So listen, I got to get something out, and I got to get it out right now. We talked in our introductory episode to the Tremors series, and we talked about people we know who love the series that came to a surprise to us.
That's
and
right.
One of them was my dear friend Kristen Fogel.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to Kristen the other day and mentioned that we were recording these podcasts. And holy shit, did she get angry that she's not involved in the recording of these podcasts. She was so mad at me, Tom. And I said, well, look, we're recording A Cold Day in Hell, and we'll do Shrieker Island as well. Join us for those. Now, of course, it turned out that these are the only two movies she hadn't seen yet.
Right.
She said no. And I said, well, you just watch them and then you join us. And she said no. And I said, hey, I'll re-record the first 4-5 fucking movies if you want. And she said no. And what I learned
and I say no.
Huh?
And I say no.
Yeah, I know. I did that without your permission, but
you would have had to ADR my part.
I did it knowing what the response would be, because Kristen Fogel would always rather carry a grudge against me than actually talk about Tremors on the podcast. Why? Because she's a fucking monster.
Well, she's welcome to have her own episode later on. I'm not averse to revisiting this. And to be honest, that what we've done since Tremors that the listeners don't know about, what we've gone through since the end of this Tremors, I'm very happy to go back to this. we have got some laborious stuff coming up, at least for me. I don't think it's the same for Mike. So I'd be very happy to revisit this as soon as humanly possible.
Oh, man. I'll save it because I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But let's just say I'm right and you're wrong.
Okay. If you reverse that, I will. Yeah, if you reverse that, then that's true.
How dare you? All right. Enough of that.
It's a cold day in hell.
A cold day in hell. Now,
we will agree on something.
We do agree. We both have this last in the series.
Yes, I think we're pretty much on the same page here.
Yeah, and we both think it's a bad movie. We declared it as a bad movie, correct?
Correct, yes.
Right. All right. How bad is it, Tom? Is it
you are in like Johnny Carson late night mode today? How bad is it? What's the deal with legal pads? It is. So this is my analogy. You've seen Casino, right?
Of course, yeah.
There's a comment in there. One of my favorite lines from the movie is when Joe Pesci describes an incompetent gangster by saying he could fuck up a cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. Great line. And this is how I feel about this movie. This movie has excellent beans and the worst possible barista making the coffee. Because on paper, this is one of the more interesting Tremors sequels.
Because I would agree with that. I was very interested when I heard it was going to be cold and in Canada.
Yeah.
That was interesting to me.
And
they abandoned all of that immediately, but
well, this is weirdly, we're 6 movies in. This is the first time they recognize the serial potential of these Tremors sequels. That you can refer to what happens between this film and the last film, that you can go back to previous sequels in the franchise and bring plot elements of that back, that we can have, continuity.
Including the original.
Right. We can have continuity of characters. This is the first time in any of the sequels that a sidekick to Burt Gummer comes back for a consecutive movie. Mm-hmm. And all those things, are excellent. As you say, this kind of Arctic wasteland shift is a brilliant change of pace. But it fluffs it all to me.
Yeah. Well, I talked about in our ranking episode, our mini-sode, one of my first notes is this idea I talked about, we've all seen day for night shots,
Yes.
but I've never in my life seen sand for snow. And I mean, it's when you start the movie, you think, okay, this is fun. We're in the snow. Wait, are we in the snow? Wait, what's going on? And it just looks like they, put a white gel over the over the processor, and they're clearly walking in the desert that is subbing for snow. And I thought, what the fuck?
Yeah, it's interesting because this is a sort of, in general, I think, when we talk about Shrieker Island, I think there's a kind of leveling off of the cinematic and video qualities to the point where it sort of becomes indistinguishable by 2020. But this is 2018, and this looks very cheap.
Yeah.
And a lot of the artistic decisions they make to try and cover the cheapness make it more cheap, more cheap looking. There's a lot of mobile camera work in here, a lot of zooming and panning, and I think they're trying to hide the fact that they don't want the audience to see what's on screen, because what's on screen is not what is being represented here.
Yeah, exactly.
We're in a different place from where we're supposed to be, and the tech, there's only so many techniques you can use to hide that.
Well, and they even hide it for the story. I mean, I just think it's strange that they go to all this trouble, people wearing boots, people with goggles, people shivering in this opening scene in which they're clearly walking around in the sand. And then our heroes, Bert and Travis, get to where they're going. And again, this movie was shot in South Africa for a second film in a row. But they're supposed to be in Canada, and they're supposed to be in the Arctic.
Right.
And the first thing that happens is, hey, where's all the snow? Well, because of global warming, it's been...
Right, which is inadvertently a problem because it kind of casually dismisses climate change.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
To cover their asses with regards
just to cover their asses that they filmed in South Africa. So all of it felt, to your point, it felt lazy and strange. Like if you don't have the means to go to the cold, whatever, set it in the South Africa again. But it lent to a cheap feeling. Yeah.
I guess the flip side of what I'm talking about in making it a serial installment in the Tremors sequels. The flip side of that is that it can seem like less of a movie in its own right, like a kind of afterthought to Bloodlines, which both on screen with the fact that Jamie Kennedy as Travis is back. We're continuing straight on from the end of the last movie. It feels that way. Behind the scenes, they're filming in South Africa again. It feels shoddier and less complete than Bloodlines. So the downside of that is it can kind of get lost in the shuffle a little bit, and I think that's kind of what happened. With this one,
I would agree.
It's easily the most forgettable of the films.
Yeah,
the sequels.
It's easily the most forgettable. But going back to my first question, how far below the other films is this movie? Is it close to being enjoyable for you, or is it far removed from that? Because there are things in this movie I liked, but I don't know. They're just too far and few between.
Yeah, no, I'd go back to my original point, which is that in abstract I like the things, but I don't remember enjoying any of them as they appear on screen. Even what could have potentially been one of the most successful moments in the franchise, which is when, is the punchline to a running gag that's been going since the beginning of the Tremors movies. The IRS finally catches up to BERT.
Right. Yeah.
And for some reason that falls flat.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's all down to execution. Again, you're fucking up a cup of coffee, because if you have that in your lap, you should be doing way more with it, and it should be way more effective than it is.
I know. I have a note here that says, "Is this a movie about solving a tax problem?" ?
Yeah. I
I
think that's the problem, that we're it's this weird kind of it's this weird effect where, ironically, focusing more on BERT and his backstory, it somehow weirdly decenters him.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's a very fine balance of how you use BERT Gummer. And I think if you overcook that pot by putting in too much backstory, too much too much, basically trying to resolve things that trying to wrap up any kind of hanging story threads that surround BERT, which is what this movie does in a lot of different ways. We actually we lose focus on what's good about that character and why he's so good at carrying these movies.
Right.
He ends up in a bed for the last quarter of this movie.
Yeah, right? I mean,
that's
the last place you want BERT Gummer, is an invalid in bed during a Tremors movie.
But that's all a result of calling back to something that happened to him in a previous sequel,
right.
Which, when in Aftershocks, when he gets... Is it Aftershocks, right? Where he gets eaten by the graboid.
No, I think it's the next one.
Okay.
I think
it's somewhere in Tremors 2 to 3, somewhere in that area.
Yeah.
He gets eaten by.
I think it's when he goes back to perfection.
He gets eaten by a graboid. He breaks his way out, but he's contracted a virus that has been dormant inside him since then.
No.
Which is a very interesting idea. Unfortunately, it means that he's bedridden for a good portion of this movie.
I was of two minds for that.
Me too.
I thought it was interesting, and I also thought how terribly inconvenient. Like, you think, from a writing standpoint, you think it's convenient. Oh, we can bring this up, even though it happened like 900 movies ago. But because of what happens to him in the story, it turns out to be inconvenient.
Right.
For the purposes of this movie.
It's an unintended byproduct of doing something which is really is a really good idea, which is to focus on the serial nature of these movies. But, because we've forgotten that this ever happened, because there's, like you say, there's been so many movies in between. And also because this, it's not like he's been having these hallucinations periodically throughout these movies. They start in this movies. It feels more like a retcon, which is essentially what it is. But they're trying to spin that as, as continuity.
Right. And
because it refers back to something that happens, but it's just, it obviously was not. It obviously will, whenever it happened, whether it's in Aftershocks or Back to Perfection, at the time they're not thinking we're going to follow this up in 4 movies time.
Yeah, right.
So it is a retcon, but they don't really lean into that. That they really think that they're doing The Wire or something. In terms of, like, something happens in one season and then 3 seasons later it's called back to.
Right.
As if that's enough. But a retcon is a retcon is a retcon.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's funny that they're even trying to retcon how graboids got into the cold, despite the fact they're shooting in Africa. And
well, aren't they described as pre-Cambrian?
Something like that.
So, and again, I think this is like, prequels are still big in 2018, and I think, they wanted to have the idea of a prequel within a sequel, that these are like prequel monsters in a sequel. I think that's what they were
Right.
going for with this
Yeah.
idea that they predate
The other graboids.
the other graboids that we've
It's
seen.
like, yeah,
Um,
it's kind of like Encino Man graboid.
right. Right.
All right. Well, we're just getting started, everybody. We're going to take a quick break, listen to some fabulous commercials, and when you come back, we'll get it deep into the so-called plot of this movie, A Cold Day in Hell. Right
Which
after this.
I will defend the plot of this movie. I will defend the
All
plot
right.
of this movie.
Deflend?
I will plot the plant of this movie. I'm
Very
also
good.
from Scandinavia.
Be right back. Does the coronavirus have you feeling oogie? Have you been sitting on your couch for weeks? Nay, have you been sitting on there for months? Well, it's time for you to get back in shape. Check out 2AT Fitness. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Facebook. 2AT Fitness was started by Tina Bernard. She is ready and raring to go to help you get back into the shape you want to get into. They've got all kinds of classes. They've got outdoor in-person classes. They've got online classes if that's what you prefer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get back in shape. You're going to find a variety of exercises. You're going to have strength training, cardio, weightlifting, even fun 5-minute burnouts that will push you to your limits. So get off the couch, get into shape. Go ahead and check out 2AT Fitness. Tina Bernard has got you for all your needs. I know her personally. She's fantastic. You're not going to meet a better person to help you become the new you. Check it out. And we're back. Tom and I are here discussing the 2018 film Tremors, A Cold Day in Hell. All right. So, Tom, what is happening in this fucking story? You said you liked the story idea itself, even if they didn't,
Yeah.
hit the nail on the head. So, what's happening with the graboids this time?
They're old new graboids.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the Arctic part of South Africa, and they are attacking a research station that has more human beings than I have ever seen in a single building.
And despite the fact that there is global warming, so there's not as much snow, it is supposed to be cold. But of course, you have scantily clad women standing in the water, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Taking some kind of measurements, some unknown measurements in a tank top.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. I mean, I
Sorry, I interrupted.
No, you didn't. You
just...
didn't. No, you really didn't. That was all I had to say. And just to now that I brought it up, there are too many characters in this movie.
Yeah.
Far too many characters. I don't know who any of them are really, apart from the maybe a handful of the people who talk most to Bert and Travis. The others couldn't tell you.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know where they are geographically. The action is so badly filmed. I don't get a sense of where they are in proximity to each other. And because there are so many of them, the script is basically people repeating the same dialogue in different ways, 3 different ways often, just to give them something to do or say.
Right. Yeah.
So it's bizarre. I mean, I don't know if it's a deliberate attempt just to do something different by saying, oh, well, we usually have a small pool of characters. Let's try and expand that and have a bigger ensemble. But then you realize why a small pool of characters is desirable. Because you can give them more than just like character ticks. None of them are sufficiently developed.
Right. I mean, you have the person who I just called Dr. Coward.
Yes.
Who just My note is he really doesn't get it. He is constantly putting his life in danger based on how big a fucking coward he is. And I just, I kept saying to myself, can we just kill this guy and move on? I was actively thinking about, well, let's kill this person and this person and this person. Let's do that in like the next 3 minutes, and then maybe we can start a movie.
And quite often, someone that I thought had been killed then turned up in a later scene.
Yeah, right.
I feel like the guy who dies on one of the rigs late on in the movie, that's happened a couple of times that he died on that rig.
Right, yeah.
So there's that. I mean, one of the characters that...
There's also the pilot.
Right.
That woman pilot seems to get lost for about an hour.
Yeah.
Like, is she just working on the plane?
Well, that's what I mean about
working on the plane would attract noise.
I get the sense that everyone is stuck in their little place.
Right.
I don't know why they're stuck or what the obstacle is for them to get from place to place, and I don't know what the geographical relationship of those places are to each other.
Yeah, they're not related to each other at all. That's
Well, I mean, one of the characters that unfortunately stands out for me is our new graboid enthusiast, which is a callback to a couple of things. She's the daughter of characters from Tremors, so you're already
Kevin Bacon's daughter.
Is this one? I mean, you mentioned before that he threatened to come back a few times, but it never happened. Is this one of the times? This looks like one of the times.
I think by now he was firmly out, but well, and that's the thing is, and
he
we're
was
going to
too
talk
busy
about
doing
this in the
I
next...
Love Dick at this point, and making British cell phone commercials.
Oh, is that what he's doing?
He did that for a while. That's what makes me think that even as late, if he was still doing that in 2018, doing a Tremors video sequel might not be the worst thing for his career. But
come on.
Anyway,
Kevin Bacon is beyond A Cold Day in Hell.
Well, it's just interesting because
I'd love to have him back for any of the other movies.
She's just a surrogate for him.
Right.
Not being in the movie, because her entire dialogue is, my dad once said, my parents told me once.
Right, yeah.
That's all she just channels it. And it's like, it's not the same. It's not the same as having Kevin Bacon in the movie to report what he said to you at a different time.
Well, and I kept having that feeling over and over and over again when she first revealed herself to be his daughter. And actually, and I can't remember the character's name, but she's the daughter of the woman from that first movie as well.
Is, yeah.
His love interest from that movie. And I remember thinking when I first heard that, I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's, it's one of those things that these movies always do. There's a great example of it in Shrieker Island, which we'll talk about next, but where I was saying to myself, who the fuck are these people and how do they know anything about this? And then it's revealed how and why. And that's one of the things that the series does well, I think, in general. Connecting past movies to whatever you're seeing now, but not here. I was like excited to see. I was like, oh, okay, I'm on board for that. But to what you were just saying, everything she says is just reporting something that Kevin Bacon had told her when she was a child. And you're just, at a certain point, you're just kind of tired.
And the other big problem with this is the only autonomy that she has as a character calls back to something that we've identified as one of the worst things about these sequels, which is Grady.
Yeah.
Because she's this... She identifies herself as a graboid enthusiast, and that the kind of graboid encyclopedia kind of fangirl in the same way that Grady was in the second movie. And go back to the Aftershocks episode, and you'll see how little we cared for that. So she's caught between two character functions, neither of which have anywhere to go. And portray like the worst mistake.
And on
of
top
this
of that.
franchise.
Right. And on top of that, you have the character of Travis B. Welker, Jamie Kennedy,
coming back, which again is a great idea.
Coming back. I think it's a great idea too, but in regards to, I don't even remember her character's name.
Not Kevin Bacon.
Yeah. So not Kevin Bacon. She's taking on what would seem to be the role of the young attractive woman, except then they have a doctor who's like a second attractive woman. So there's doubling up of characters. And to your like you said earlier, I mean, there's just too many fucking people in this movie.
Yeah, and you know, this one of the joys of this series has been the romantic subplot between two characters, usually Bert's sidekick and, you know, whoever is in charge of wherever they are.
Yeah.
And I really like that aspect of movies, and it's something I look forward to in every movie. But yeah, because it's just kind of swallowed up by what other characters and similar relationships, it just seems perfunctory to me.
It was as though they thought, even though she's an adult woman, that this daughter of Kevin Bacon and the first love would be thought of as a little girl, or be thought of as, to regard her the way maybe Bert would, and so that Travis can't be after her, he's got to be after somebody else. It's like, it felt like that decision was made, and that's why they added a second woman. Well, I mean, 2 out of the 5 women.
Yeah, if there is indeed any logic behind having this many characters, then that might have been part of it. I think it is maybe just. I can only think it's just like we want a kind of disaster movie where there's lots of different types of people in the same place. That's what we're trying to do here, and that's the way that we distinguish this movie. But it's to the detriment of the movie, sadly, to have so many ill-defined and undefined characters. So it's problematic in that respect. And also, you know, I think a kind of rule about exposition for me is that if even the characters in the movie are commenting on how clunky the exposition is, your exposition is too clunky.
Yeah, right.
At one point, Jamie Kennedy says, "No shit, Sherlock," to some piece of exposition. I'm just like, guys, if your characters are tired of hearing exposition, how do you think we feel?
Right. Yeah. Read the writing on the wall, please. Well, let me ask you this, because we talked about this at length in our last podcast, and we had differing views on it in regards to the first person dying being a black man.
Yeah.
I thought it was more purposeful as opposed to ignorant racism, which am I right in characterizing that's how you felt the filmmakers were ignorant in how racist they were being?
Yes. Well,
because I have a note here.
Specific regards to South Africa, I think they hadn't clocked
right
that the racist history of South Africa changes everything.
Okay. Because I have a couple of notes here that, there's first death, a black woman, second dead person, also black. Those are my notes.
Okay.
Thoughts?
Well, I think you've said it all. Said it all there. I mean, I guess that's more
Maybe it's just
more
this director.
It's more egregious that happens given how many characters you have to choose from to die.
Right. Yeah. That's why I found it more upsetting in this one.
Yeah, I got to say I didn't notice that. I mean, I did find it hard to keep track of who died when and who's still alive. But I fully believe that. Yeah, interesting. Well, that's. I mean, on a political level, I think this again. trying to do something interesting with Bert Gummer and his politics and failing miserably here. So I feel like in previous sequels are either on Bert's side or they're not. And I kind of like the fact that there's that clarity in them. Like, Back to Perfection is like, yeah, Bert's right.
Right, yeah, right.
Tremors The Legends Begins is like, Bert's kind of a dark character. I don't think we should be supporting him. Bloodlines is like, no, it turns out he was right. This one is kind of like, you know, from the very beginning. I mean, you know, we're now post-Trump. Well, we're like in the meat of the Trump era, and there's talk about how he's, you know, it's an open carry state, so it places him within the politics of that. But by the end of the movie, it turns out everything, all his conspiracy theory ramblings have turned out to be true. So,
right.
I mean, there was a point in the movie where you sort of think that he is just being paranoid and that the government aren't trying to develop bioweapons. Or, you know, that it's not about water rights and that kind of stuff. But the government do turn out to be the bad guys, and Bert's right after all. So I think it's kind of, that ambiguity is all for naught, really. But that's, I mean, to me, that's worse than, I prefer what Bloodlines and Back to Perfection do, where they're like, you know, we're just going to adopt his perspective and see the movie through his eyes.
Through his eyes.
Which is
right,
ironic,
yeah, exactly.
because you get more actual Bert Gummer POV in this movie than you do in any other movie.
Than any other movie, that's true.
See his nightmares, which originally I thought was like Bert Gummer PTSD, which I would...
Well, that's one of my notes, was PTSD Gummer.
Which I would understand far more, given what he's been through, what we've seen him go through. But it turns out it's just this virus that's been living inside him
for years.
Yeah. Which is, I guess, a little bit of a disappointment.
Well, it turns out to be a disappointment just because it renders him immobile.
Yeah, and I have got the sense throughout this movie that, you know, they start talking about his legacy very early on in the movie, and I think I probably knew that he survived the movie, just because I knew there was another movie afterwards and that he was in it. But I was sort of like, well, you could sort of, you know, you could go either way with this. You could kill Bert off if you want to. It seemed like they maybe filmed enough where you could let him die without filming additional scenes, you know? Mm-hmm. Because it went so far into the deathbed stuff. And they're talking about his legacy and passing the gauntlet. There's even there's a
passing father to son thing
through the Cubby's cap, which let's face it, even Crystal Skull didn't go that far to actually let Shia LaBeouf wear that hat. Okay, even I don't know whether that was just Harrison Ford.
At the end of that movie, Harrison Ford is like, "Hey, get your fucking hands off of that."
But they go as far to do that, so I kind of thought like they're at the very least they're feeling out, hey, what if we kill off Bert? He's not gonna live. Michael Gross isn't gonna live forever. We want to keep making these movies. Does it make sense? Would it work? What would we need to do?
They could have killed him and he could have come back. They could have gone Curly's Gold on that one.
Well, they've gone Curly's Gold when he played his own ancestor. This is like two films from Curly's Gold. And that won't be the last time we mention the City Slickers 2, The Legends of Curly's Gold in this podcast, for sure. No, so I sort of think there's something... Yeah, I get the sense that it really could have gone either way in terms of whether Bert survives or not. And the whole film is kind of like a fake out, because much more so than the next movie,
which we seem to be itching to talk about.
Well, it's like it prepares you. This movie kind of prepares you for something that doesn't happen in terms of Bert's mortality. And it's just interesting that the next movie doesn't do that. And yet, he, to the best of our knowledge...
Spoiler alert.
To the best of our knowledge, expires in that movie.
Oh, mercy.
Yeah.
I was planning on putting our disclaimer at the top of that episode, Tom. You're kind of fucking shit up for people.
If you haven't seen Shrieker Island by now, I mean, when this comes out, it'll...
Yeah, when this comes out,
if you haven't seen Shrieker Island, that's your own fault. It'll be free by the time
it'll be
this
about
comes
5
out
months.
as well. So we'll have to Amazon Prime rental it like we did. Yeah.
All right, we're going to take another break. And when we come back, we will finish out Tremors, A Cold Day in Hell. Right after this, everyone. Stay tuned.
If you're anything like me, you spend the majority of the day wondering whether you want coffee, beer, or wine. Whichever way you fall, Brew Bar has you covered. Located in the heart of 3rd Avenue Village in glorious downtown Chula Vista, California, which is also my neck of the woods, Brew Bar is a coffee shop, bar, and eatery rolled into one delightful package. Tim and Alex run the place, and let me tell you, listeners, these guys know their coffee. And after you've been in their company, so will you. They turned me on to pour over, and it's literally all I drink now. If for some crazy reason you don't want to try the best coffee in the world, they've got espresso drinks, all kinds of teas, and even coffee cocktails. You heard me? Coffee tails. And we're just getting started. Bottle service on craft beer and wine, alcoholic and caffeinated potions, an all-day food menu with plenty of vegan options. All served up in an atmosphere hip enough to know you're getting the best quality, but not too hip that you feel the need to drive to 7-Eleven and get a bucket of brown swill. Brew Bar. It's the best place to be for beer, wine, coffee, and tea. And if you go, you might even see me.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here talking about Tremors, A Cold Day in Hell. All right, Tom.
Where are we going here?
Well, we're in Canada, South Africa.
You're already wrong. Go on.
And they're at the research station. All shit kind of goes haywire. And by the end, they decide in order to save BERT, we have to catch a graboid. My note is catching the beast is the biggest nonsense in the fucking series.
I mean, it's a classic sequel inversion, and it has to be seen for that. It's like, after all this time, now we have to keep the graboid alive to save us.
Yeah.
It reeks of that, which I don't mind. It looks good on paper, but you're absolutely right. It's a bunch of nonsense and puts minutes on the movie that don't need to be there.
Yeah, that was the other thing. I mean, just minutes upon minutes upon minutes, right?
Yeah.
What about all the stuff right before that, where they're kind of like they're trying to get to that shed and they're jumping up on rocks and trying to get from one section to another section? Was any of that exciting for you, or?
It would have been. It's bizarre to me. I don't. By Shrieker Island, Don Michael Paul's directorial hand is so assured.
Mm-hmm.
This just feels like a troubled production because, and Bloodlines, is the action is really well done.
I really like the look of Bloodlines too. I mean, going back to that, I don't think we talked about it in the episode, but one of the things I like was the shot selection. There was a lot more close-ups on faces where you have to actually see good acting, and to me it was visually interesting to look at, and this movie didn't really have that at all for me.
Well, the action's really hard to follow. I mean, you're talking about things that I didn't necessarily know happened.
Right.
And we've never had that problem before in the series, and we won't in the next movie. So I don't know what's up here. I'd love to get some BTS insight into My suspicion is this was like, hey, we're here. Should we make another Tremors movie?
Right, yeah, exactly, right.
I know about 50 people who could play a bunch of undeveloped characters just to fill out the movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's even a point, one of the reasons that like that I have those hairs on the back of my neck of like something went wrong here, like in watching a movie. There's a moment at which Jamie Kennedy is kind of caught on camera in a moment when they're supposed to be running away ferociously, and he's going really slowly. And
I remember that.
Like, does he know he's on camera?
Is he aware he's being chased?
And
Does the character know?
Having, I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but while we're talking about Jamie Kennedy, while I had some reservations about his use in Bloodlines, overall I was pretty happy with it.
I was loved definitely him in
happy.
Bloodlines.
I was happy to see him back. I was happy that they have a returning sidekick.
Yeah.
And for him to just kind of become the sort of irony monitor.
Yeah.
Of this movie's script. It's a waste.
Yeah,
to me.
Totally.
And where it's interesting because where you really need him emotionally with regards, because Bert's illness is kind of a fake out.
Well, one of my notes is that at a certain point, this whole movie turns into like an episode of House.
It really does. Maybe there was a situation where they were coming up, they had the crew of Bloodlines. Someone was filming House, and they were just like...
Yeah, I got an idea. What do they have to get out of the mouth? A gland?
If you look very closely, you can see a bemused Hugh Laurie in the background
just
of
off
one
in
of
the
these
corner.
shots going, what are you doing here?
I'm
rebooting House. What are you doing?
What is it they have to get out of the graboid's mouth? Is it a gland?
I don't know. Jamie Kennedy's in there for a while, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, that's another part where...
Which is the whole reason Bert has that virus. Is that he got inside a graboid.
Yeah.
And so Jamie Kennedy's
goes inside a
solution
graboid.
to that is to go inside as well.
But they also have this moment where they have to get something out of the mouth. I think it's a gland, isn't it? Or something like that?
Yeah. I sure.
But, it's like one person struggling. They have this kind of Survivor moment in the show Survivor when somebody's trying to complete a task and they're just too damn tired or whatever, and they switch out. They sub in. They're like, all right, give me a try. And they keep having somebody try again and again and again.
Like that scene in Airplane where everyone's lining up to punch the hysterical woman in the face.
Leave It to Beaver Mom.
You could literally do that here
right.
with the graboid. You could have a line of
Barbara
an
Billingsley,
endless line
right?
of people. And like, hey, I'm pretty sure that guy died in a previous scene. Get him out.
Get him the fuck out.
I only just put it together. Something you mentioned earlier about this movie being all about taxes.
Mm-hmm.
That reminds me of... There's another famously bad sequel that is all about taxes. Do you know what I'm thinking about?
I don't know.
That is also kind of a monster movie.
Addams Family? No.
You're not wrong.
I'm trying to remember the second Addams Family. It's the first one where they're actually having...
There's a lot of estate. There's a lot of
there's a lot of
estate
estate shit, isn't there?
No,
but that might be the first movie.
I'm thinking of Phantom Menace. I just put that together. It's like if your movie is about taxes, then it's gonna fail.
I always think of the Simpsons episode when they're clearly going to see the Phantom Menace, even though I think they call it something else. But the scroll starts and it's all about tax policy and trade deficits. And Homer's like, trade deficits? What the fuck?
Uh-huh.
Which was my exact feeling when that movie started.
Yeah. And I mean, they have that, speaking of things that bad sequels do, they also have, they mention the Cubs' victory in the World Series. Right? Is this the movie that they do that?
The Cubs, where they mention it?
Yeah, they mentioned the Cubs' victory in the
Yeah, I mean, they won in
in the early
2016.
part when Bert's yeah. So again, in 10 years' time, no one's gonna care.
Right, yeah.
So it's that's just another thing that. Also, what do you feel
I'm not
about
even sure if
Bert
people
running...
cared a lot 2 years later in 2018.
Right, exactly. What do you think of Bert running a market? This doesn't seem like where he'd be.
No, yeah, it does not.
After what happened in the last movie, when he was a reality TV star.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm trying to remember, do they re-show that video at the beginning of this movie? Is that still a thing?
Yes, I think they do.
Yeah.
They definitely show it in the next movie, but I think I remember them doing it here as well. Is this the one? I'm trying to remember. Is this the one where Bert chews them out for not taking it seriously because they're watching the reality show? I think that happens in this one.
I don't remember. They're all starting to blend, Tom.
I know. Yeah. So people watch Bert's TV series at one point.
Oh, yeah.
I've made that note. And it's like a shorthand both to reintroduce Bert to audiences.
Yeah.
So they're still assuming people haven't seen the previous movies, and also to just reintroduce the lore of
the Graboids.
Of the Graboids. Yeah. So that does appear, but I kind of like that because this is a companion piece to Bloodlines.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that they do in that respect, I am, in theory, supportive of.
Well, and I have a note here. It's kind of hard for me to even remember. Like I said, these movies are starting to blend together, but it felt like there was an attempt in the script for this movie to try to push that father-son relationship forward. But it just wasn't as successful.
Yeah. I thought, there is a kind of scene late on in the movie where, we finally get to the heart of the emotional stakes. Bert might die, how Travis feels about him. We start to see the family dynamic. I'm just not feeling it in the rest of the film.
Yeah.
Because we come into this movie and that, they've known that they're father and son for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
We should have had some kind of development. They've kind of become estranged again, so we're sort of resetting to the beginning of Bloodlines.
Right, and that was the thing where I thought that was a bit of a wasted opportunity.
Yeah, I wanted to see that they were relating to each other differently. In this, they just have to learn how to interact with each other all over again.
Well, it's just sort of the same shtick.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I at one point, another piece of the same shtick which comes back with Jamie Kennedy's Travis is just how awful and inappropriate he is with women.
Yeah, for sure.
And it occurred to me at one point, I'm like, in the same way that the Trump era provides the perfect kind of cover for Bert and his bad behavior, we've kind of got the same here with Travis and his bad behavior. It's like, what do you expect? The president's a sexual abuser.
Yeah, right.
Just
following his lead.
It's hard to sort of take it out of that, rip it from that context. So the Tremors was.
Well, one of the lines I wrote down: "Is there any doctor that Travis won't hit on?"
Right.
Because it was a doctor in the last movie too.
And doesn't he tell a woman to take off her pants at one point?
Yes.
I found that. I thought that
it was in trying to save her life, though, if memory serves. But still.
Well, I just sort of thought Bloodlines was what, 2016, 2015,
15. I think.
2015. So that's pre-Trump. I wonder if in a screenwriting point of view, it's in the same way that the sort of the veil of Trump and his politics kind of let racists and bigots be what they
What
are.
they are, yeah.
I wonder if it also lets screenwriters think that they can get away with
anything.
Shit.
Yeah, right.
That was my feeling from watching it. And that always heightened when you're watching a series as we are that covers such a huge
amount of time, right?
Yeah, a huge amount of time. That you start to notice these little pockets when certain things are happening in society and politics, and they're coming out in the movie.
I wrote down a question, Tom, that said, "Do Trump lovers or do Trump voters love this movie?"
Right. Okay. There you go.
It was a note that I took.
Yeah, and I mean it's. I think in reality the movie,
and maybe in asking that question is just because I can ask that question, maybe that gathers my negative reaction to the movie as a whole.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to you want to have it both ways. You want to poke some of Bert's armor of kind of masculinity and anti-government paranoia, but at the same time you just end up reaffirming that what he says and thinks are what's going on in objective reality. So yeah, I mean overall that's the feeling I got, that you would feel pretty vindicated having voted for Trump, having watched this movie. Especially as the movie puts as much thought into climate change as Trump probably ever has.
Exactly. Well, even by the end of this movie, Travis is asking Bert, or it just states, "You don't die. How do you not die?"
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that the audience is probably starting to ask themselves that question as well.
It's one of those lines that feels like one of the screenwriter's annotations accidentally became a line of dialogue.
Yeah, exactly. And so the funny part for me, too, is that I finally came to a place of Tremors where I thought, okay, so Tremors is kind of, forgive the pun from the first movie, but going over the side of the cliff.
Yeah. Skiing the skyscraper.
Yeah, and it's just, skis off the skyscraper. It's just not going to be as good. And I waited a long time to do Shrieker Island, to actually watch it. And I thought, okay, I got to finally watch this movie. And, once again, reverting back to old form, pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. I wonder if there was a reckoning. I mean, it's hard to say how much attention anyone's even paying to any individual movie in the series. But, when watching it the way we are, it does look like they recognize that this movie had some fundamental flaws, and the next movie was about addressing those in a productive fashion.
Heard.
That's the feeling I get from it. Whether that actually happened or not, whether it's just an illusion of us watching.
A happy accident? Yeah, who knows?
A happy accident, but, I mean, immediately you're with a smaller pool of characters, and that gives you an idea that they don't want to repeat that mistake.
Yeah.
Or at least they want enough variety that they're going to move away from that for a while. So, it does, I mean, it's interesting, but it is very much, I think you can go either way on Aftershocks and Bloodlines in terms of whether they're good or bad movies. I don't think there's any real doubt that this is a bad movie, but it's the most disappointing for me.
Yeah.
Because of the potential it had to really make the previous movies count in a way that they've never counted before.
You know what's funny, too, that I'm just realizing now is that certainly for movies 3, 4, and 5, I kept thinking, okay, this is one movie too many. Okay, you're doing a prequel. Okay, you're bringing this back after over a decade. None of these, every single time I kept thinking, this isn't going to be a good movie. And then it was.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, I might have walked into A Cold Day in Hell thinking, all right, you've got me, Tremors. And all of a sudden, oh no. So, yeah.
Well, also, but I mean, the other kind of illusion is when the movie starts. It's not just that you've come off a really good run of movies, and that you can kind of convince yourself that this is going to be good too. Is that when it starts and you see the choices that the screenplay is making early on in the movie, before you've seen how they handle it, you get more excited.
Yeah.
So there is a bigger cliff to fall off for this one, just because it's definitely hit the nail on the head about where the series should go at this point in lots of different ways.
Sure.
But seems absolutely powerless to make all that good work count for something.
Yeah, when you see sand for snow, you go, uh-oh.
Right. Right.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is Tremors, A Cold Day in Hell, the 2018 film. Let's move on, Tom. I'm ready for Shrieker Island.
Yep, let's do it.
All right. For Tom Stewart from Lonesome Whistle Productions, I am Michael Shantz from the How Dare You Awards. Please let us know what you think of A Cold Day in Hell. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. Please rate and review us. It certainly does help. Check out our YouTube channel. Anything else, Tom?
Take off your pants.